Welcome everybody, this is Jank from College Football Red Zone, coming through after we are getting ready to wrap things up in terms of the 2025 preseason deep dive special series, where we have taken a look at all 136 teams from the FBS level and really take a look at all of these teams from a 50,000 feet perspective. But now we really get into the nitty gritty of who do we really think is going to be playing in that college football playoff at the end of the season. And most fascinatingly, who is going to host that national championship trophy at the end of what is going to be more of a grind than what we have seen in past years, since we are entering year number 2 of the college football playoff, with some changes to the college football playoff format. Because as you may know, while we are keeping the 12-team playoff at least for 2025, who knows what happens after this year, there was a change in that it is going to be a straight seed. So last year we did see the 4 best conference champions get an automatic bye into the quarterfinals. That's not going to happen this year. It's going to be straight up your 4 best teams in college football. They are going to be the ones receiving those automatic byes into the quarterfinals. You still have the process of you can have the 5 best conference champions as well as the that will get an automatic bid, plus these next 7 best teams in college football getting those getting in that top 12 to make your college football playoff field. So that's the format for those that maybe haven't been dialed in as much over the course of the off season. But there is no off season if you're a college football sicko like myself. So it's going to be a little bit different of a format than the rest of the deep dives, because we've already previewed these teams. And so if you would like to see a little bit of a deeper look into each of the programs that I am going to go ahead and mention, definitely recommend you checking out those preseason deep dives. I will have a card either like somewhere up here or like somewhere in my description or anything like that, so that you can have something to reference back to at any given point. But getting all of that administrative stuff out of the way before we get too deep into what I think the college football playoff field is going to be, and then ultimately how I think it's going to play out in terms of the entire field, definitely need you guys to go ahead, do a couple of things for me. Hit that like button, as that not only warms up my cold dead heart, but what that also does is that it allows YouTube at least more clarity in terms of, hey, this should be a video that should be pushed out to more people and should be viewed by more passionate college football fans like yourself. And then secondarily as well, we are closing in on 50 subscribers as of the original recording of this video, and so I would love to see us get to 100 subscribers before the start of college football season. We can make that happen by you hitting that subscribe button. We are going to do some really special things when the actual college football season does get started. And so if you want to be an A1 since day one and really be a true OG, hitting that subscribe button would mean truly the world to me. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to go ahead and start with my top 4. So these are going to be the teams that I think are going to go ahead and get that automatic bye into the quarterfinal. So starting with my top 4, at number 4, I do have the Clemson Tigers. I think they are going to go ahead. They are going to be my predicted ACC champion. I do think that they're going to drop a game against South Carolina, which is going to prevent them from being any further up, but I still think Clemson is going to have an incredibly strong resume, not having any other blemish, and then having a signature win against LSU during non-conference play, plus getting a victory against, I think, a really good Miami team, in who I think is going to make the ACC championship and who Clemson will go up against, but Clemson will take down Miami, so they'll be my number 4 team. Georgia, I have as my 3 seed. My only at-large in this top 4, actually, because I do think Alabama will beat Georgia in the SEC championship, but I do think as well that Georgia is going to go undefeated for the regular season. I do have them favored in every game that they play in, but losing a game to Alabama in the SEC championship. And so I'm gonna try to do the same thing that I did, or what the committee did last year, where there wasn't much punishment for teams that did lose in the conference championship game. So I don't think Georgia will drop below 3, but Alabama, who I do have as my number 2 overall team and my overall seed, I do think they'll drop a game. Alabama, I think they will, because they will have Georgia on the road. But at the same time, I do think that Alabama is going to get their get back when they play Georgia in the SEC championship. So, confidentially prediction there, seeing Alabama and Georgia play each other twice, and then kind of splitting that initial series between Alabama and Georgia. And then, of course, my number 1 overall seed, I think, is going to be Ohio State Buckeyes. I think this team is going to be very successful in terms of reloading. I am a big Julian Saban believer. Do have them going undefeated, running the table in the regular season, as well as winning the Big Ten championship, getting that signature win specifically against Texas in week number 1. So an undefeated conference champion from the Power 4 in Ohio State will represent as my overall number 1 team in college football. I do think that will certainly happen. Now, going into my next group of teams, these are my 5 through 8 seeds. And these are going to be teams that will have to play in the first round, but they will get the benefit of at least playing on their home campus in terms of that first round matchup. So with that being said, we now jump into that next group of teams. Starting with a number 5 overall seed, I'm going to go with the Oregon Ducks here. I'm very high in terms of what Dan Lanning is building over there at Oregon. I know that they're going to have to replace Dylan Gabriel, but Dante Moore has starting experience, and so I do think there is that legitimate championship pedigree. The question is, can their defense take that step up? But I feel really safe in Oregon making it to the Big Ten championship. I do think that they may drop a game, but I do think that we will see like Oregon in the mix and be like a little bit higher ranked than maybe another Big Ten team, that even though that Big Ten team might actually make the title game and lose to Ohio State. I do have it at number 5. At number 6, I do have Arizona State, which, interesting enough, I do have Arizona State running the table, but because I don't think Arizona State is going to have as high of as good of a resume, even as a conference champion, that's why I do have them at number 6, even though I do think they have a legitimate shot to run the table. So I do have them at number 6 and getting like the fourth automatic bid in terms of your conference champions, which leaves one more conference AQ still available. Then I do have Miami at 7. Miami making it to the ACC championship and then losing to Clemson. And then at that point, you get into a resume comparison between Arizona State, Miami, and Kansas State. I do think that Miami is a better team than both of them. But because Miami didn't actually win the ACC, I do think that they would be behind Arizona State. But then I would have them ahead of Kansas State, who I would have as my number 8 team. And I think Kansas State is capable of running the table, but because they dropped the Big 12 title game against Arizona State, it compares like Miami and Kansas State. And I think Miami would be a tad higher because they will have a better signature win, particularly against Notre Dame. I do have Miami beating Notre Dame in week number 1. So that's our 8 teams so far, and you know we got 4 teams left, and these are going to be teams that are going to have to go on the road to play against their first round opponents in the CFP. We will go with Texas. Texas, actually, I have is really the only multi-loss team to make the college football playoff. I do think that this is a year generally where you do see a scenario in which I don't think 9-3 is going to be enough to get in that large bid. I think if you want to be in that CFP conversation, regardless of conference, I do think you're probably looking at winning 10 games just based on how I have everything playing out. Now, I do think there's a couple of exceptions. I think Florida, if they were like a 9-3 team, for example, I think they would get more consideration for the CFP, but I don't think Florida is going to finish 9-3. I think they're going to be a little bit worse from a records perspective, even though I think Florida is a phenomenal football team in its own right. Texas, they will have an opportunity to get some signature wins. And that's another thing, too. I do think that they are going to beat Florida on the road. And then they'll have their shots against Georgia and Ohio State. I think from power ratings perspective, I think they're going to be the best team in the nation. Up there with Ohio State, like they're a 1A and 1B. But because they're going to have a loss against Georgia, I think they are going to miss out on the SEC title game entirely, but still get in as an at-large regardless. They're my 9th best team. And then at number 10, I do have Penn State. The Nittany Lions, I think, is going to be a team that's very capable of going to the Big Ten title game. But I think what's going to happen to Penn State, at that point, they're going to have multiple losses as well, because they are going to lose to Ohio State twice. I don't trust James Franklin to beat Ohio State, because historically they had his number, and now that Ryan Day has been able to really flip a switch during the CFP last year, I think that I trust the championship pedigree more for the Ohio State Buckeyes than I do for James Franklin and that coaching staff. Still think it's going to be a really good team that is going to make the CFP once again, but just not as high of a seed as last year, which will also be applying to Notre Dame. Notre Dame, I do have as my number 11 team, or at least seeded number 11. They'll have to work their way up, because I do have them losing Miami to open the season at 0-1, but then they'll go on a tear after that, win their next 11 games. What's tough for Notre Dame, though, is that they are not going to have the benefit of a conference championship, so that's going to hurt them a little bit, so they don't get a chance to make really that last final impression. I think that hurts them a little bit, but, you know, a team that I have, like, number 6 from a power ratings perspective, but they'll be my number 11 team. And then, you know, we got to talk about the group of 5 representative that I think will have the number 12 seed. I don't see them being higher than 12. And it'll be a little bit more of a controversial selection, but I actually have the Liberty Flames as my G5 representative. And this is really what it barrels down to. I'm not going to be someone that is your record. You are what your record says you are. I don't believe that whatsoever. I do think that there is some nuance in terms of, you know, comparing resumes. I do also believe that if you are a football team that does run the table, you win every single game in the regular season, and you also go through and you go out and you play in your conference championship, you win your conference championship, so you finish the year 13-0. I think you have to make room for that kind of team in a 12-team playoff, regardless of how strong the strength of schedule is. I know strength of schedule is a very important discussion to have, and trust me, I'm right there with you. Liberty being a team that is going to have no margin of error whatsoever. Like, if they drop a single game this year, Liberty does not belong in the college football playoff conversation. I'm sorry, I just simply don't believe that. However, what I will say about Liberty, I think they genuinely have a chance to win every single game, and I would have them favored in every single game that they play in this season, at least going into week number 0, obviously, right? A lot of things could change, but I think because Liberty goes undefeated, I don't think there is going to be, and that's another thing too, I don't think any other G5 is going to go ahead and run the table. Now, if Boise State does pull an upset off against Notre Dame, that's a completely different conversation. Or if you see like Tulane go undefeated, or James Madison go undefeated, James Madison playing Liberty during non-conference, you know, and any of those teams, you know, Memphis, throw Memphis in there, you know, some of these other teams, UNLV, another really good team in the G5, if any of those teams go undefeated, then I think they're all going to have better resumes, for example, than Liberty. But because I think Liberty is going to be the only undefeated G5, I think they should absolutely get that number 12 seed. So just a recap: Ohio State, Alabama, and Georgia. Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia, and Clemson. They're going to get a bye into the quarterfinals automatically. And then what we'll see afterwards is we'll see Kansas State host Texas. That'll be the 8-9 matchup. We'll have Oregon host Liberty, your G5 representative. You will also have Arizona State host Notre Dame. And then Miami is going to host Penn State. So some really quality first-round matchups that I think are going to be relatively close, right? And, you know, we saw like a fair number of, you know, first-round blowouts. I don't think that will necessarily happen if we have this kind of field going into the 2025-2026 college football playoff to determine your national championship. Now let's go ahead and take it a step further and kind of make a prediction in terms of how I think these games will generally gonna go. It gets really interesting because this is really where like the blue chip ratio really comes into play. Teams that do have a a deeper roster from a blue chip perspective. And really the rule of thumb dating back all the way to 2015 is you got to have at least 50% of your roster being blue chip guys. That's 4 and 5 star recruits. And not everybody in this field actually will meet that. And we'll go into that in a moment. We'll start with the Oregon and Liberty matchup. I'm not going to spend too terribly much time here. I think Oregon is going to ransack Liberty like they did in their New Year's Six Bowl matchup against this same team a couple of years ago. And so Oregon should win pretty easily against Liberty to go and play Clemson in the quarterfinal. Next up, we'll have like Kansas State and Texas. I think that would be a really fascinating game, but I think Texas will outlast Kansas State just barely. So that will be a road upset right out the gate. We didn't see any of that last year. So I will have Texas beat Kansas State, and then Texas will have a rematch against Ohio State in the quarterfinal. In addition, Arizona State is going to have Notre Dame. I do trust in the championship pedigree of Notre Dame, right? I do think that Marcus Freeman is building something special up there in South Bend, Indiana, and I'm really high on Kenny Dillingham as well. But the difference between Notre Dame and Arizona State is I do think that Notre Dame is going to be the deeper team, and I do think that is going to show in what's going to be another upset on the road where I will have Notre Dame beating Arizona State, but both really good teams. And again, I want to emphasize, aside from maybe the Oregon Liberty matchup, I expect all of these first round CFP games to actually be pretty close. And then finally, you got Miami taking on Penn State, and I'm really fascinated by this particular matchup. I think both of these teams do have what it takes to make a national championship run, especially in a year like this where I do think that like it's going to be truly open. I do have like 6 favorites marked down, as well as like a couple of dark horse and like several long shots. There is a world, I think, like there's 15 to 17 teams out there that have what it takes, if everything goes right, to win a national championship. I have Penn State and Miami in a similar tier where they have most of the ingredients to win a national championship. At the end of the day, I think Penn State is a better team, even though they'll have more losses on the resume than Miami would in this case. So I will have Penn State beating Miami in the first round of the CFP, beating Mario Cristobal, and moving on to the quarterfinals, where Penn State will go on and they will take on Alabama in the quarterfinal. Now we get into the quarterfinal matchup where, we will see Ohio State and Texas gear up once again. Last year we did see kind of like the reverse of this, where Ohio State loses to the team that ends up being the number 1 overall seed in the CFP. They go play them again in the CFP in the quarterfinals, and then they kick their ass on their way to a national championship. I don't know if that happens here. I don't see like Ohio State going out of their way and getting worked thoroughly by this Texas team. I think there's ultimately going to be more questions on that Texas roster than Ohio State. So, again, a really close game, but I think Ohio State does win it out, and they will move on to the semifinal, and they will play the winner of Clemson and Oregon, where I'm actually incredibly high on Dan Lanning. And I think because they're going to have more overall talent than Clemson does, I do have questions about Clemson's defense and if they're going to improve enough to be a good enough defensive unit, because this was a defense I think that was in like the 40s last year. That's not going to cut it once you get into the quarterfinals of the college football playoff. So I do have Oregon pulling an upset there as well and beating Clemson. And speaking of upsets, I think Alabama and Georgia, I think they're both going to be one and dones. I think like Notre Dame is again going to get the better of Georgia in a neutral site matchup, because again, I trust that Notre Dame is going to be better balanced offensively, and I trust the culture for Marcus Freeman more than what Kirby Smart has, even though I would acknowledge that probably from an X's and O's standpoint, Kirby Smart is probably the best head coach in all of college football, or at least, a top 5 head coach in college football. I think Kirby Smart would have the edge, like on an on-field perspective, but I trust Marcus Freeman and the culture that he's building over Georgia's maybe talent advantage that is certainly eroding thanks to the rules that are in place in modern college football. So Notre Dame, I will have them beating Georgia, and then I'll have the same thing for Penn State against Alabama. I think Alabama is going to run the table, but at the same time, once you get into CFP play, when it becomes more of a grind, and there's no easy win once you get into the quarterfinals. I think James Franklin is going to figure out how to get over the top, take care of business against Alabama, and so Penn State will also move on into the quarterfinals. So we got Ohio State taking on Oregon, and then you have Penn State taking on Notre Dame. That's the semifinal matchup. So the first one is going to be Penn State and Notre Dame, which is ironically a rematch from last year. Although this time around, I do think that Penn State does get the get back, and they beat Notre Dame this time around. So Penn State will move on to the national championship game, where they'll take on the winner of Ohio State and Oregon. And I will go with Ohio State here. I have them in higher rank than Oregon in the Big Ten. So I got Ohio State and Penn State meeting in the national championship game. And I do think this is a year where I just trust the championship pedigree more than Penn State, even though Ohio State may allegedly have more. They may have more questions on the surface than Penn State. I am willing to give Ryan Day the benefit of the doubt in this situation, because I do trust him to win big games more than James Franklin. That's just where I stand. And I know for most of the big games that James Franklin has played in, yes, he was an underdog, so he does what he's supposed to do. I think it's the same thing here, where I think Penn State would be an underdog to Ohio State. And so I do have Ohio State ultimately winning the national championship with Penn State getting there. So if it's how I think it's going to go, I think it's going to be the third year in a row where we do see a Big Ten team win the national championship. And it's also going to be, it's a third year in a row that you would see a Big Ten team win a national championship. And it would also be the first time since 1999 that we see somebody other than Alabama or Georgia repeat as a national champion. So definitely am very interested to hear what you guys think down in the comments below. Who would your college football playoff field be going into the season? I'm definitely fascinated to hear. But based on the hours that I poured in terms of doing record predictions for all 136 teams going into this season, that's how I feel like the playoff field shaking out, and how I subsequently feel about seeing like the college football playoff games actually going. So hopefully you enjoyed this college football playoff preview, as we will start diving into some key week 0 games next week. So very excited to actually be able to get into all of that. If you guys are excited for that as well, go ahead and make sure you hit that like button, as that warms my cold dead heart, as well as push this video out to more college football fans like yourself. Plus, we have a real opportunity to do something special in the fall once we really get into full swing of college football season, bringing something back that hasn't been done in a very long time. But I know many of you in the college football world have been praying for it. But yeah, man, go ahead and hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well if that's something that tickles your pickle. And with that being said, this is Jake of College Football Red Zone signing off. Hope you guys are all out there having a good one. Take care, everyone.